What makes the achievement of emotional sobriety so difficult is the habits we have, the patterns we have in our behavior, the habitual ways that we've come to think about things. We have to really become aware of those things in order to challenge them, because the consciousness that has created a lot of the problems in our life cannot solve it, cannot change things. So what happens is the first step is waking up. Well, what we're doing tonight is now through the last, God, I'm not so sure how many weeks we've been spending on this, but it's been an incredible journey where we're exploring how this 12 steps help us develop a healthy self-esteem. And we're relating that to also emotional sobriety, because I believe emotional sobriety is dependent on having healthy self-esteem, and that healthy self-esteem is dependent on emotional sobriety. They go hand in hand, they inform each other. And what we've done up to this point is we've explored step one. I'm going to really go through this quickly because I'm going to turn the meeting over to Herb and let him introduce step 5 to you. But in step 1, right, which is we admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. In terms of the emotional sobriety point of view, it's waking up, right? It's finally developing an awareness of who we are and how we're functioning. We're waking up from a trance. Bill calls it in his letter, seeing how wrong we've been, but not knowing how to get off the merry-go-round. So we develop this insight into, my God, the way I'm living, the way my life is going, the trajectory is not good. I'm in trouble, but we have no idea what to do yet. The practice of self-esteem involves, as we've talked about, these 7 pillars, but from Dr. Nathaniel Branden, I believe that the 3 pillars that are activated in this step is living consciously. We're expanding our consciousness. We're starting to see things. We're putting on a new pair of glasses, so to speak. It involves self-acceptance, the practice of self-acceptance, and the practice of self-responsibility. We're now starting to see it's that how I'm living my life, how I create my existence is what's creating the experience I'm having. We are beginning to integrate that idea into our consciousness. And that's a very important idea that has to be integrated if we're going to grow ourselves along these lines. Step 2 comes along. You came to believe that a power greater than ourselves can restore us to sanity. Sanity being just soundness of mind, that we don't have a soundness of mind. When I am so emotionally dependent, that is not a soundness of mind. That's a situation that creates an I'm okay if consciousness. It creates a highly emotionally reactive existence. So this step opens us up to some new possibilities. We start to see that there's some possibilities here that we may know very little or nothing about, but that doesn't mean that they don't exist. I cannot see oxygen, but I'm yet using it all day long to survive, to live. And so we're opening ourselves up to possibilities that we could never, at many times, imagine existed. This creates a sense of hope. Once again, the 3 practices of self-esteem, living consciously, self-acceptance, self-responsibility, I believe, are all activated here with this step. Step 3 comes along, made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood him, is making a commitment now to discover that hope, to realize that hope, to take what was once something we could imagine that was a fantasy and turn it into reality. Well, to do that, we've got to make a commitment, right? That's what this step is about, is making. Herb talks a lot about making a decision on turning towards something very different than we've turned towards in our life. So this becomes now I think is we are now making a commitment to develop a consciousness of emotional freedom. And once again, those three pillars of Dr. Brandon says living consciously, self-acceptance, and self-responsibility are relevant here as well. And finally, now that we have the foundation, right, of our new life, which is these first three steps, now we're told, now you guys, you've made this commitment. We're going to see some first tangible evidence. You're going to sit down and make an inventory. See, step 4 in terms of the emotional sobriety part is about developing a practice of self-examination, being able to identify our patterns. Bill calls it our basic flaws, being able to see our habitual ways of thinking and feeling and behaving. All things necessary to increase our self-esteem. So, with that being said, I'm going to turn the meeting over to Herb, and I will be seeing you guys next week. I'm going to hang out for a little while because I want to hear what Herb says, and I will be seeing everybody next week. Herb, good evening. I think you're muted, or you went back to the monastery for silence.
Oh, there we go. You can't silence me anymore.
Can't silence you anymore. No.
I'm Herb, and I'm a grateful alcoholic in pursuit of sustaining and fostering growing emotional sobriety. That's wonderful. Thank you, Alan, very much for this introduction. Just to be clear, step 5, admitted to God. Pretty straightforward. I've never heard God talk back to me, quite frankly. Admitted to ourselves. Even when I do, I cut myself so much slack. And quite frankly, I'm so given to self-deception, I don't even know I'm deceiving myself. That's how deceptive I am. Today, I hold myself accountable to a variety of people for that very reason. 38 years sober. All right, so let's get on with step 5. Admitted to another human being. Accountability. The exact nature of our wrongs. Notice this isn't therapy, although it's therapeutic. This isn't telling somebody a story about our mischief. I'll be kind. No, that's not what it is. Listen to it. Admitted to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. And Bill talks about it as he introduces the 4th step. We're looking for the truth. We're looking for facts. We want to know them, to discover them, and to reveal them. Why? And Alan captured the essence of it. Step 1, I'm filled with darkness. I'm using different words to paint a picture. Step 1, I'm filled with darkness. That I've identified. It's either addiction or it's unmanageability. It doesn't matter. We don't need to get into the details. I'm filled with darkness. I admit there's light deep down inside of me. Step 2. I turn to have a relationship with light. Step 4, I identify the exact nature of the clouds and darkness in me. I do it over days or weeks or months. If you're unfortunate, it might take years. But we're identifying, making a list of, writing it down, getting some instruction from somebody who knows what they're doing, unpacking the nature of my resentments, my beliefs and my motives, my story, my unenforceable rules, the exact nature of my fears, self-reliance, the exact nature of my inappropriate and unhealthy sex behavior, the principles that I have that I transgressed, or the principles that I don't have that I didn't know that I didn't have and that I needed. Identifying all the secrets, all the dishonesty, all the mischief and mayhem that I've caused. The impact of my self-centeredness on the people in my life. Identifying it, writing it out, weeks, months, sometimes years. Doesn't have to take years. Probably does have to take months. depending on where you're at, your maturity, your personal development, your psychological development, quite frankly, the time available and how motivated you are. Step 5 then is sitting down with somebody and reading it. It's not a discussion. My opinions, my translation of the big book, pages 72 to 75. It's not a discussion. It's a reading. And somebody listens and witnesses to your life. And my experience with it is that as I read it out to somebody, and as somebody has read it out to me, my combined experience distilled is that now I'm reading something that I've written over days or weeks or months or years, discreetly over that period of time. Now I'm sitting down in one sitting, my recommendation, no rules, but my experience, my recommendation, in one sitting, and I'm reading it, page after page after page, reading it out loud, for the very first time reading it out loud, for the very first time reading it consecutively, so that I'm hearing it out loud for the very first time. Column 3, column 4, column 3, column 4, column 3, column 4. Motives and beliefs, impact on other people, etc. with the reading. And it's usually hours, anywhere from 2 to whatever hours is defined by shaping the 4th step and the 5th step by an experienced sponsor. But I'm saying hours, usually 3 to 6 to 8 hours, depending again on whether this is the first time or the 10th time. And I, as the reader, am hearing it for the first time. And after about an hour or 2, I'm really hearing it. I'm hearing the impact of me on me, and I'm hearing the impact of me on other people, and I'm horrified. Seriously. Embarrassed at the very least, embarrassed in my own presence. Although I have talked about it during the entire journey of doing the 4th step with the step guide or sponsor that I've had, when I say it out loud consecutively, I hear it, I experience it differently. The key to a quality 5th step is complete disclosure, including all of the secrets and the shadows, anything that I'm uncomfortable with, anything that I'm embarrassed about, anything that I feel guilt and shame about, whether that's healthy or not, it doesn't matter. Any wrinkle in the linen, in the soul. I have lots to say about the 5th step, as I have a lot to say about most things. The point of the 5th step is a humbling experience. It's in the big book, that phrase. The deflation of the ego at depth. To discover the truth about the source, exact nature of the problems in my life. To uncover the truth, to disclose the truth. And in the disclosure, to begin getting free. This whole process of step 1 is the darkness that is the suffering that drives me into a process for healing. Step 2 and 3 are assuming that the healing comes from the light deep within, and this 4th step process identifies the clouds in me that block the sunlight from me. And when I do the 5th step and then the 6th and 7th step, that's the removal of the clouds so that the sunlight can shine in me, to me, in a healing process over time. By the end of the process, the step process, step 9, a process of forgiveness. The real traction begins in the step 4 and 5 process. This process of forgiveness, meaning the release and being released from the obstacles in me that prevent me from having a relationship with me and therefore with other people. Alan gave us some information from Brandon. Oh, and thanks for the person who was doing the reading of the letter. He prefaced it by saying, I am the one I am waiting for. This is the beginning of discovering of that, the true self, in contrast to the false self. Because we've covered up the false self with the cinder blocks that we've built to protect our ego, to protect ourselves, to survive. We have built this wall to protect ourselves, and now we discover that, in fact, the wall is imprisoned us. It doesn't protect us. It prevents us from having a relationship with our true self. And this process of step 4 and step 5 and 6 and 7 is the process of the deconstruction of that wall, so that I can have a true and authentic relationship with myself. I'll add to the things that Dr. Berger talked about, because this is the beginning of the awakening that is promised in the 12th step. It says spiritual awakening. Let's just use the word awakening. An awakening to have a relationship with my true self. I become conscious. That's the beginning of the thawing out, to become conscious. And I become aware, self-knowledge of the exact nature, the sources of my problem. Instincts gone awry, fight, flight, and freeze, as translated into our behavior. The underneath root, Bill says it on page 62, the root of our problem is selfishness and self-centeredness, and the solution is the turning from that self-centered to other-centered. It's that simple. The turning from self-centered, the root of my problem, to being other-centered, the solution to my problem. All of those words get personal interpretations based on your appreciation of the process and the needs and consciousness that you have. We get that knowledge of ourselves, and then to continue with Dr. Berger's list of a few things I'm going to add to it: self-acceptance, yes, self-responsibility, and then self-esteem, and that's emotional sobriety. By the end of the 9th step, we are also establishing, in a similar pattern, a relationship with others, and then fostering that growth in our awakening and sustaining the awakening and expanding the awakening through steps 10, 11, and 12. The real enter into the world of the spirit, to enter into the world of emotional sobriety. I'm going to stop with that. And I think either Thom or Roger can pick it up from there.
Hey.
Thank you for that, Herb. Hey, Thom. I'll go ahead
Roger.
if it's all right with you, Thom.
Sure.
Okay. First of all, thank you, Herb. My goodness. I mean, such a heartfelt and deep and personal, explication, right? Description of step 5. I just want to add a few additional thoughts, because what you said was so powerful, I think. But a couple of things. I want to tie this step, as you and Alan have already done tonight, into the concepts of self-esteem that we've been talking about a little more directly than I've done in the past with the other steps, and then continue that as we move forward with the additional steps. At the beginning of step 5, Bill writes, of all AA's 12 steps, all of AA's 12 steps ask us to go contrary to our natural desires. They all deflate our egos. When it comes to ego deflation, few steps are harder to take than 5, but scarcely any step is more necessary for long-term sobriety and peace of mind than this one. So as you mentioned, Herb, starts off talking about what? Talking about ego deflation, right? Ego deflation, that's the foundation of all 12 steps, Bill makes clear, is his viewpoint. And as we've been talking about in terms of tying this to self-esteem, our view of self-esteem, when I say our, I mean Alan's and mine, but you guys can speak to that for yourselves as well, is a humility-based notion of self-esteem. If there is a flaw, to me, in Nathaniel Brandon's work on self-esteem, it's that it is too self-focused. It's not that I disagree with what he talks about, all the elements, living more consciously, becoming more self-accepting, learning how to take more responsibility for myself in my life, and as well as awareness of my impact on others, learning how to express my wants and needs, and hopefully also being concerned with asking others about theirs. And then the last three, as we've been talking about them, the practice of personal integrity, making my walk match my talk, making my behavior match my values, and having a sense of purpose and letting that sense of purpose give me focus. And then Herb, you brought in Brandon's seventh pillar, though he doesn't call it that, unwillingness, right? The willingness. So all of these principles are very important. I don't disagree with, they're all critically important elements of self-esteem from my point of view. But we've added the importance of humility, because from my perspective, nothing is more important than a sense of perspective about my place in the bigger picture, my place in the larger order of things. And if I take a universal perspective, as best I can see the universe, not really a very big place in the universal order of things. In his books, The Untethered Soul and Living Untethered, Michael Singer devotes a lot of attention to that. So what is humility-based self-esteem? It's self-esteem that has more room for inclusion of others, for relationship, for connection to others. It also allows us to have more of a sense of not just my importance in the order of things, but and my impact on other people. But it allows me to look at how much harm I've done to myself and others, sometimes in my pursuit of self-centered goals that were too self-centered, goals that were too self-focused. So because of that awareness, we've added humility as a very important aspect of self-esteem, because it leaves much more room for the inclusion of others. So, and Bill addresses all of this to one degree or another. Twice in this work on step 5, he talks about the importance of a sense of belonging. He uses that word because he mentions the sense of isolation is something that's characteristic of so many people in recovery, so many people grappling with addiction. And that in this process of writing down my character defects and connecting with another person, I open myself to what? To connection, right? To the sense of relatedness to another person. As far as other steps that are, to me, related or very relevant to step 5, they all are to one degree or another. But as you and Alan both mentioned, living consciously, well, I'm trying to expand my consciousness about my own imperfections, right? The ways that I've harmed myself, the ways that I've harmed others. And I'm trying to do what? I'm trying to grow humility within myself, because nothing, as Bill says in those first couple of sentences of step 5, nothing will help me, connect to my humility more than recognizing my own limitations and shortcomings. Remember that APA, American Psychological Association, definition of humility: the quality of being humble, characterized by low focus on self, and an accurate, neither over or underestimated sense of one's accomplishments and worth, and acknowledgement of one's limitations, imperfections, mistakes, gaps in knowledge, and so on. So there it is, the emphasis on recognizing and embracing my own limitations, not so that I can hate myself as a human being, right? But so I can begin to look at those limitations and imperfections as points of humility and as points of growth, as points of learning for myself. I make a big distinction in my thinking about these issues between evaluating my sense of worth as a human being versus looking at specific mistakes and errors in judgment, and even things I've done totally intentionally that are in the moment that have brought a great deal of harm to myself and others. They weren't mistakes. I meant to do them and meant sincerely to do them, but later on recognize the harm, hopefully, through steps 4 and 5 that I've done to myself and others with them. So other steps that get brought into this are integrity, right? Integrity has to do with honesty, has to do with my words matching my internal experience and my behavior aligning with my internal experience. Step 4 and 5, God, are like the definition of integrity in that respect to me. I'm really taking ownership of what I've seen myself do. Self-acceptance, clearly, trying to name these things so that I can take ownership of them and all the guilt and remorse and so on that I feel regarding these behaviors that I've engaged in. Self-acceptance is very central to that process. So I won't go further now in terms of, there are so many ways that the 12 steps to me, and step 5 included, are interwoven with Brandon's ideas. The 7 pillars, if we add willingness, along with the 2 that I would add, humility and relationship, connection with others. Those are the 2 I feel like are not nearly emphasized enough in the 6 pillars, even though everything that is emphasized has terrific value, tremendous value from my point of view. So thank you so much, Herb, for that heartfelt and clarity creating, right, description that you gave.
Thank you.
Thom.
Well, you as well, Roger, as far as heartfelt and
Right.
clarity. That's beautiful. And it's like, it's I'm giving you a little pop test here, Roger, but do you have access to rereading the part you read about everything in the steps being counterintuitive at the beginning? Do you remember that you were saying?
Well, all of the AA's 12 steps ask us to go contrary to our natural desires. They all deflate our egos. Bill W's words, not mine, right?
Okay, that's because, when you read that's where I latched on, I spent the day in a couple of different places helping people learn a little bit of the ability to pan back and check bigger picture to just, because I think it's really important. It has been important for me, and I think I'm not the only one that when we're looking at what we're doing with all this work is to check in every now and then, is saying, okay, do I know why I'm doing this? Do I know what I'm after? And it's like, and there's nothing more true. When you say that was the thing I was looking for, is runs counter to our natural tendencies. So basically our natural tendency is to be a chicken shit and run from everything. It's like, I don't think that's actually an absolute truth, but I think that most of us have many stories that could support that way of thinking, that we run, hide, dodge and weave and bob and weave. And to me, what step 5 does in terms of facing ourselves, is, we open the big fucking double doors and invite somebody in to witness as best we can you know, and as Herb said earlier, it depends on how many times you've been through it and how, you know, it's a progression. As we learn more, we share more, but I don't know, you know, I think for most of us, the very beginning of that, what, you know, is in whether that's sometimes in an official step 5, but it certainly as a therapist, I know that sometimes it feels the same way for somebody to walk into a therapy session for the very first time and to do something that feels like the stupidest thing they could possibly be doing, but they're doing it anyway. And what I want to point out in the pan back position to everybody who's involved in this conversation, everybody who's listening to this, is in the midst of all this stuff. And this is not counter to humility, by the way. This is about reality. And that is, this is a very courageous thing to do. You know, and credit where credit is due, man. It's like be as kind to yourself as you would be to you know, I call it the reverse golden rule. You know, treat yourself the way you would treat somebody else. You know, it's like treat yourself at least as kindly as you would somebody else, and at the very least you would say this is a very courageous thing to do. And and just the empathy of I understand how frightening it is. And ultimately, what we're looking for when we're in this process is, in my opinion, because for a lot of the work I've done has brought so much of this stuff down to how it all boils down to fear. And I think that our very identity is ultimately defined by our relationship to fear, how we respond to fear, both intrapersonally and interpersonally. And what I'm thinking about today, as I'm listening to both of you, is some stuff that I've thought about and written about in the past about reassurance. You know, it's like reassurance is something we actually are let's just take the re off of it. We are all looking for assurance. And unfortunately, in our culture, we have a really warped idea of what that really is. And it's very unrealistic in the sense of it's everything. We ultimately want assurance to be everything is going to be okay. You know, well, it depends on how you define it, but you know, it's like, you know, it's like ultimately it's going to be whatever it is. And I think I even mentioned this in this group not long ago, the idea of I say that reassurance is to fear as food is to hunger. You know, and what we want to be able to do is when there's fear, we want to reassure. And what we do in our culture is we don't reassure well. We reassure by minimizing, by criticizing. No, there's nothing to be afraid of, or you don't need to be that afraid, you know, and we do it to ourselves and we do it to each other. You know, I often tell people that you know, if somebody shares a fear, often the more reassuring thing is just to say something like, wow, that sucks, you know, because reassurance ultimately is in the connection. And this is so much about the essence of step 5, the true deep connection with another human being, you know, with God, your understanding of God and another human being. But at the point of, so I don't sound like I've gone too far off the mark. It's, the point is when you open these double doors and you let somebody in and you let them in on your previous secrecy, your previous just shame-based things that you've hidden, is you're taking this tremendous risk, you know, for somebody to, they're, you know, and if we've been on the other side of the 5th step, you know, we're not there to judge, you know, we're not, but but what, you know, what people will do, what we all will do, we'll project our own judgment onto that person who's listening. So, but we're taking this chance of saying all of this stuff, and we really are risking somebody basically becoming our worst fear, which is to say, wow, you are one big load of shit. You know, it's like we really are. It's like and you have to risk it. That's the thing about reassurance. If you really want the reassurance, you have to risk that. And it's like, and the hardest thing to do is, I think one of the harder things to do for those of us who have strong should monsters and shit like that is to really begin the process with 5th step and that level of honesty to basically to basically begin to actually get your head around the idea that the person that you're talking with is not judging you that way. It's like that's the shift, or certainly has been for me in fifth step work, literally, but also in therapy, where I share dark places, where I shine the light in the dark corners, and where I have always assumed there would be tremendous, the judgment would line up with my judgment, and then it doesn't. And that creates a conflict that now I have to start working with. But it takes us to reality. And that's the thing. Every time when both of you were talking about humility, everything it comes down to me is it's about reality. It's just my place is my place. My abilities are my abilities. My weaknesses are my weaknesses. My strengths are my strengths. It's like we're just trying to get a fucking accurate view of who we really are and how we fit as much as we can in the human experience. So, but anyway, it's courageous and it's a big deal. And I love that Bill acknowledges that it's so damn counterintuitive.
Yeah.
Because so much of the work we do, that's one of my favorite little nutshells I have on my poster on the wall that I created was always move towards your demons, because they take their power from your retreat. It doesn't mean that they don't get, by you retreating, they don't stay neutral. They get stronger. The more I cringe in front of that power, the bigger it doesn't even have to change. It gets bigger. So, but what we do is if that power is there and I stand up to it, all I'm doing, I'm not going to beat it. I'm not going to destroy it. I'm just going to stand up to it. And all of a sudden I've changed my relationship with my deepest fears. And that's what going into the fifth step is.
Thanks, Thom, and 100% the courage it takes to do this, but that courage comes from desperation also. The desperation that brings people to the 12-step community is the desperation of the dying in terms of their addiction, and then what keeps them there is the desperation of the living. That is how difficult it is just to live and navigate and be emotionally sober.
Well, absolutely, Herb, because as human beings, we don't do things just because it's a good idea. It's like, I mean, at least that's not my experience. My office just got, the pipes busted during the 0-degree weather and flooded out and doing all this changing and renovating, and I'm clearing the place out and cleaning things like that kind of stuff. Why am I doing it? Because all hell broke loose. Yeah, right. It's like otherwise I could sit there in the same sort of stagnant place with all the same stuff, just collecting and everything. And it's such a great metaphor. It's literal, but it's also a metaphor for what we do with ourselves. It's like when the shit hits the fan, we get busy.
I regularly ask people, how free do you want to be? Because this is about freedom. How free do you want to be, and how soon?
I love it.
Yeah, I mean, it's like it creates like almost deer in headlights. Like you can almost see them shake when you when you say the second part. I just in kind of an experiential role play thing. When you say that, I feel myself just kind of going, okay, well, soon, Herb. Yeah, right.
And I'll be back in touch.
Thank you. Right. Don't lose my number. And another thing that's come to me this year, which both of you talked about the progressive nature of this, is, and you said something about, what was the word you used in terms of reassurance? Yeah. I have a new word, a new approach that just come to me this year from my workshops, and I've been doing it for 25 years, is that whatever you do is good enough. Whatever you do is good enough for right now. And because I'm dealing so much with people who either have low self-worth or have some type of maybe overcompensating perfectionism. And I'm getting such great feedback from the people that go, oh, when you said that, Herb, I'm not behind. I'm not behind others. I'm just where I'm at. And it's good enough for right now.
I hear a lot of people criticize the 12 steps that they're old-fashioned. I can understand that criticism. They were written back in 1935. Some people that are agnostic have difficulty with the word God used in the steps. For me, I look at the process that's involved, the forces that the 12 steps generate are so powerful that I think they're ageless. There's this interesting phenomena that happens when you work the steps. They create a charge and then a discharge. You know, the first step, we're powerless. Our life has become unmanageable. It creates this charge. You know, we're in big trouble and we don't know what to do. And then step 2 comes along and it says we have hope. That charge, that existential crisis that we have is resolved. What's happening here is parallel to life. We charge ourselves when we breathe in. When we exhale, we discharge. That's the rhythm of life. And the way I love to think about the 12 steps, it's helping us get connected to the rhythm of life so we can learn how to show up in a good way.